So, there we go. Again, my name is Holly Haley. I'm with DNR, and it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, John Keller. John began his career in forestry in 1978. He received his BS in forest management from Washington State University in 1984, and eventually settled in Washington State and worked at the Department of Natural Resources for 30 years, retiring as a silviculturist. He currently spends much of his time enjoying his own 182-acre certified tree farm in Cowlitz County and doing some part-time consulting work as a partner with Cascade Woodland Design Incorporated. Thanks for joining us, John.
Well, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me, and I appreciate being able to come here and tell you a little bit about a project that I became involved with about 5 years ago or so. So today's presentation that I'm giving is on figuring and big leaf maple. There's two things I definitely would like for us to cover in detail. One is to make sure you folks leave with an understanding of what figured wood is, and then specifically in our own native big leaf maple here on the West Coast, how to identify. And then if there's time, I've been involved with a research project that I'll tell a little bit more about. That research project is private research with a total. Anyways, so this research project is called 100 Figured Maples. I'll tell you a little bit later why it's called that. And it's sponsored by Pacific Rim Tonewoods, which is a tonewood mill up in northern Washington, up the Skagit River, a short ways. As was noted in the introduction, I'm a consultant forester, so I've just been retained by Pacific Rim Tonewoods to help them with the research and in general bird dog and buy maple logs for them periodically as well. So here's an overview of the mill. It is state of the art. I doubt if there is a larger tonewood mill in the Pacific Northwest. I'm not aware of it, if there is. And so they essentially make acoustical guitar components, is their bread and butter. Of course, they branch out into a number of different areas as they receive wood. Their main focus is really on acquiring old growth spruce further up the North Coast and koa out of Hawaii for their acoustical guitar components. But they also deal with sliced alder veneer. And then they can also, and then of course, obviously, figured big leaf maple, which is actually less than 1% of their business. So it's lucrative. And for that reason, and also I think for some of their own altruistic reasons, they've decided to go ahead and proceed with the research that we'll get to later on. So what is figuring wood? Actually, as I look around, I see figuring wood all over the place in this room. It's just basically a pattern in wood that is pleasing to the eye, that has an aesthetic appeal. There's a number of attributes that a piece of wood might have that make it pleasing. The color, luster, or sheen. How fine or coarse textured it is. The direction of the grain. And then especially talking about grain, the ability of that piece of wood to catch and reflect light. So some of you are probably right now wondering who came through here and put a bunch of funky chunks of wood on me. So really, as your attention begins to wane, feel free to pick up some of these pieces that you see And just move them around a little bit. We don't have really bright lighting here, but see if you can detect some of the refraction that's going on. And a lot of the, it depends primarily on how you saw that piece of wood. That's the correct way to saw it is huge in terms of really bringing out figure in wood. So, you can kind of see that in the diagram. It shows a tangential piece and a radial piece. I'll probably primarily be referring to, the tangential as flat sawn, which means that when a log is ran through a piece of, through a mill, it just basically just kind of keeps slicing off the top. Whereas quarter sawn, the sawing actually, from the radius, it goes horizontal and vertical, and horizontal and vertical, or it can even spoke. The cutting can actually even be done by hand, in a spoke-like pattern. So normal figuring is basically the stuff that just about any piece of wood would have. On the left, which is a flat sawn board, you can kind of see that cathedral-like pattern from the growth rings. That's typical normal figure. The center is more of a quarter sawn, where the growth rings are narrower and tighter. And then the right is just knotty wood that you might see, in somebody's den, for paneling. You can also, normal figure would be something like the raised you might see in oak. So there's a bunch of different wood anatomy components that can be shown in normal figuring. Ironically, normal figuring in the industry world is usually referred to as on figure, because you just don't even measure it. So I would like to go ahead and start honing in a little bit more on big leaf maple, our one native lumber maple here in the Pacific Northwest. And there are 4 different types of figuring that we're going to cover today. There are several more out there, but these are the main ones that we see. So now we just want to start talking about why would a piece of maple wood do we have? What are some of the figuring characteristics that it have? So the first one I want to talk about is spalting. So you can see on the right what happens is it's just a basic discoloration of wood. The wood can actually have a wide variety of colors, even some, here we're kind of seeing tans or browns and blacks, but in some areas of the country, it can be green, red, more yellowish. And so it can be quite, really pretty. And the spalting is caused primarily from a fungus that's entered the wood. It has nothing to do with growth rings or the grain. And essentially the black lines that you see and the changes in the color, just how different fungi has been able to mark out and protect its own territory in that wood. So on the left there, you can see a table that a fellow I know had made. You can see some of the spalting characteristics from that. There's kind of what, if you cut a big leaf maple down and you saw that kind of staining on the butt, that's probably a good sign that you would have spalting in that log. Most spalting occurs when a log has been cut and is just sitting there, or it's dead and standing. And then on the right, versus kind of more close up. This is the type of figuring that most folks are familiar with, burls. Anybody in the audience ever cut a burl somewhere? Yeah, so anyways, they are, they're beautiful. They're essentially a tree growing wild. Something stimulates an area of the tree. And, of course, trees have lots of dormant buds in them. And we think that what's going on with the burls is that those dormant buds are activated. And, you can see here. There's actually little pins almost that you can see sticking out. And, that's essentially this crazy non-directed growth that's going on. And it does all sorts of different things with the grain of the wood. This is what it looks like more in the woods. You can see the big burls sitting right here for those of you that haven't cut them before. And they're really highly valued by wood makers. So here we see a bowl, but there could be any number of knickknacks and furniture, you name it. Both with the burls and with the spalting. Those two are really, there's a lot of opportunity for making just all sorts of different things with them. The two that I really want to hone in on are the two types of figure, fiddleback and quilted. And these are the ones that are really, that have a high value in terms of musical instruments. So this is essentially just vertical distortions in the grain of the maple. So you can see here how the grain just kind of squiggles like that. And those squiggles are what eventually turn into the type of figuring that you see when we're looking at the light reflections, when you move some of those chunks of wood around that are in front of it.
What causes that?
So because of the squiggles, let me make sure. So because of the squiggles, every time you move that, the actual surface of the grain is changing in relationship to the light. So it would almost be like moving a mirror. That you're holding up to the light, and it's kind of shining this way, now it's shining that way. I guess that's probably the best way I could describe that.
I was curious what causes the wood to keep in that pattern.
Okay, so I didn't plant you in the audience, but we are going to talk about that. Okay. So the causes of figuring both fiddleback and the quilted are actually under some small degree of debate. Here's some things we know about it. We know that some trees figure might be present in the trunks and the limbs, but maybe not everywhere. We can find figure in trees individually or scattered in the stand. And then we also know that just in different geographic areas, they have a tendency to have figure maple trees in them. So for example, around here, I was just kind of contemplating as I was driving up Highway 12 from Longview, as you did, Ellie. That further on, up towards Mossy Rock, for example, is a real hot spot. Pilsing is another one that comes to mind. And the Skagit Valley, where Pacific Rim Tonewood happens to be another hot spot. So they're kind of scattered around. Another thing we know about fiddleback and quilted maple is that estimates vary, but probably if you were to go on out and look at look at a stand of look at 1,000 different maple trees, you might find two with significant figuring in it. You might find some with a little bit of figuring down low or underneath the limb, but that's all. And so because it's rare, because it's highly sought after, that's where the value, of course, the basic economics comes in. So, quilted figuring, it's, again, as we were kind of discussing, is the light reflection, and it's reflecting all sorts of different angles, just because it has these mounds and depressions in it. It can also it can look like a bunch of different things. It can look like sausages, it can look like popcorn, you name it. But as the board is sawn and cut off, it highlights and brings out those different reflective characteristics. Just a little tidbit that's really stuck with me that I learned is that, not only will they make musical instruments, components, and furniture out of quilted figuring, but my understanding is that, like in mosques, like Saudi Arabia, places like that, they'll buy quilted maple that's been cut and veneered. They'll actually put that, just like we have this old growth plywood here, surrounding us in this room. They will often use this quilted maple.
John, with the fiddleback or quilted, would that affect the tonal quality of, say, a guitar or something like that, just because of the irregularities in the wood?
So, yeah, the sound of guitar makes, is pretty darn, is pretty darn important. And actually, for acoustical guitars, this might be, they'll use it for the sides and the back and maybe the neck as well, but they won't use it for the front soundboard. They'll usually end up substituting, rosewood or spruce or cobalt works as well. Of course, if it's an electric guitar, it doesn't matter. I mean, it could be I guess it could be who knows what, and still work. So the fiddleback style of figuring is the one that Pacific Rim Tournament focuses on most. And that you may have heard this called by other names. Curly figured maple family is what I say it's in, but another name for it is called flame. So some of these things, it's kind of like the fiddleback might be a tighter type of a figuring unit than the curly, which might be wider than the flame, even wider. As a matter of fact, I think part of the reason why this became really popular, not just in acoustical instruments, but in electric guitars, is Carlos Santana apparently kind of put these things out there in public. That's what he uses in guitar with flame figure. So it's pretty easy to kind of get things mixed up when you're looking at these pieces of board. And let me strike something. I should have done this earlier. Sorry, I got myself. So I'm going to pass around a couple of pieces here. This is a pretty good example of quilt. And then you can kind of look at the back, and it's been kind of shined up. And then this is a sample of fiddleback. And this is the outer sapwood surface. So this is where the surface indicators are, like if you cut into a tree, you can see it. And then this is the back. Unfortunately, I never, the guy I got to do that for me, I didn't think to have him do this piece. But you can still look in the back and see the coloring. So what I want you to remember is that, when you look at this, you know, if you look at it from the crosscut side, that's where you can see the annual rings, but when you're looking at it like this, the prominent lines that you're seeing and that have this corrugation feel, that's the manifestation of the fiddleback. So essentially, this. Yeah, that's actually my fault. Let me do that. So running this way is the actual figuring. You can see it here on this, the back of this acoustic guitar piece. And then running this way is actually the growth rates. So anyways, it can make it pretty nice. We've kind of got pretty full lights in here right now, but when you look at these things in person, they're pretty impressive. Okay, so how can you figure out whether you have one of these figured maples on your property? Well, it's pretty difficult to really get a good idea, at least. You know, I've been kind of doing this, you know, a few times a week, a few times a month. And I get out there now and then, but I've only been doing it 3 or 4 years, maybe seriously. And there are some people that have been out in the out cutting and looking for figured maple for years and years and years. And so some of them have some different things that they say they look for. I'm a mere mortal. I don't see some of the things that they tell me they're seeing when I've been out with them. But I do know this. This is how I can go ahead and approach and find out if there's a piece of if there's figuring in a tree. One is you can take an axe and cut a window into a maple. Now this is really an outsized. You'd never really want to cut that big. This is either the world's smallest axe or I went overboard. And I did go overboard because I was actually kind of excited. That was just a little bit of a different pattern than what I'd seen. And I was trying to figure out how, than what I normally see. And I was trying to figure out how it, how far it carried. But basically you can actually, go in, walk up the tree, just take an axe, just get it, you don't really need a very big window. Just look in there and see if you can detect any of the indicators on the outside of the sapling. So as you've got these different pieces of wood in front of you, like this one right here, that's a real obvious one there. Take a look at the outsides of these, and that'll this area right here, you kind of have to look at it and make sure you're not looking at the inside rather than the outside of the sapling. And just kind of visualize if you were to cut a little hole, little window into a maple, those are the kinds of risings and relief that you might see on that surface. The challenge is that you can be on the ground and cut these little windows in. But that's no guarantee. You might find something really exciting, but there's no guarantee that figuring is going to carry up very far into the tree. And as a matter of fact, specifically with fiddleback, it's and we think that it's my thinking, I don't know if I've heard other people say this, but they probably have, is that some of that distortion in the grain, that curling in the grain, may be caused from the tree, being in the wind and maybe rocking back and forth a little bit, rocking, near the base of the tree, that may be creating some of the distortions, and that may be causing the grain to kind of buckle. Because often after you might find this kind of figuring for 3 or 4 feet up in the base of a tree, and maybe one in every 50 trees possibly. but it can disappear really quick. So sometimes if you think you have a hot one, you can actually hire a climber to go up into a tree and, take some samplings up there. But there's still a lot of risk in that, and as a matter of fact, Pacific Rim Tonewoods does not want people to go and, cut a window in, think that they've got maple, and then, and then cut it down, thinking that for sure they're going to have a highly valuable tree. We recommend that you don't take a maple down unless maybe you have another reason for doing it. Maybe it's a danger tree close to your house and you want it down anyways. Could be part of, a larger timber sale you're putting up. Probably some other circumstances. There certainly are maple buyers out there that are happy to let you go and cut down every maple tree you have in the forest. Then they can kind of come out there and say, yeah, we'll take a block out of this one. But then you've got a big mess. Better is, and especially if this happens in the spring and summer, is if you follow the tree, lots of times even just like dragging it into the landing, if it's in a regular logging show, the bark will peel right off for you, and you can take a look. You can go ahead, it's easy, it's on the ground, you can go ahead and cut it up. Cut the log towards the top, towards the bottom, skin it as far as you want. And then, here you can kind of see these lines here. Those are showing, this log here with very good field back figure indications.
What's the market for longer cutout? You've got some small pieces here. The reason I asked, I had a song on the introduction.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Sold pieces right here, you just want to put it on the wall.
Yeah, that kind of market, I honestly don't have a very good idea of. Those are kind of like, small pieces, sometimes decorative pieces for woodworkers. I don't have any idea. I would be happy if there were other, do you have any idea?
So a company that I grew up nearby is G-Ball Hardware, something to that effect, or figured goods, things like that. And basically their whole business model, they take trees like these, slab them out an inch or two thick, and then sell them for, maybe $1,000 a slab for a really nice big piece. So they're pretty low effort, and then they're selling it to like a home woodworker or someone who turn it into fine furniture, that sort of thing. So it's a pretty low input for the sawyer once they get the log there, and then they're just flipping the live edge slabs, which are kind of in fashion.
So it sounds to me like at least what they're doing, what they're retailing was pretty lucrative, so
Oh, yeah.
With Pacific Rim Tonewoods, there's several different ways that big leaf maple, big leaf maple can be sold. Most of the time, maple cutters, what they'll do is they'll say, well, I'll tell you what, we'll cut it down, then we'll give you 50% of whatever we get out of it. So anyways, that requires a high degree of trust. There are also buyers that will, come on out themselves. They'll see maples on the ground. They'll go ahead and cut bolts out of it that they'll eventually make up into like billets, like the gentleman in the back was talking about. And so they'll just pay you so much, for a bolt of a specific size. And then Pacific Rim Tonewoods, there's a real shady side to the figured wood market. And if you have a big leaf maple along the county road, there's a good chance if you went out and studied it, somebody's probably already checked that out for figuring, and it may not have been you. There are a variety of theft rings that are out there. And so Pacific Rim Tonewoods does not want guys showing up in pickup trucks saying they got this with no teeth. Saying that they got this off their brother-in-law's property and, trying to bring that in, they actually need a specialized forest products permit to even, haul that kind of wood. There's more details to that, but we won't go into it. So, what we do is we just, we look at the log, examine it as best as we can, and then we'll just buy the whole log. There's some risk for the tonewood mill in doing that, because you may see figure indicators going all, the whole length of a figure maple log and on all sides of it. But that is no guarantee as to how deep it goes in. That figuring needs to go in 9-10 inches at least, for it to be usable, at least for acoustical instruments. Another way, however, you can tell if what the depth of the figuring is like if you know where the tree came from, the stump, you can go look at the stump hole. Either up here in the stump hole or down here. We jack that tree over or what, but you can see here that figuring is going all the way in. Just all the way into probably what used to be like a sapling. So that's another way you can tell. It doesn't mean that figuring is going to go in 12, 14, 16 inches, 10 inches deep, however deep that is, all the way up, but it's a heck of a lot better indicator than if it only went in a couple of inches. So there's a question, I think there's a question earlier about, why are trees figured? What is the cause of that? And, there've been a number of different things thrown out there. It's been really fun and an education for me, to learn, and hear some of the observations that some of the kind of the salted earth maple cutters out there, I've seen over the years and where they've observed trees, as they were growing. So, I mean, the big question is, is it something environmental? Or is it genetic, or is it a combination of both? Some of the stories I've heard is, some people think it might have to do with, the soils or how the tree grows or even the angle of the sun. I've heard some really crazy stuff out there too. Pacific Tonewoods has actually done, had a grad student up at Simon Fraser do some research on it because they felt it might be genetic. Or at least the best figure trees were genetic, and they did find, I don't understand all the details of it, but they were able to find a genetic marker for figuring in the tree or trees that were studied, or is it a combination of both? And so my take on it is that I know that some figuring is caused by the environment. If the tree has a heavy limb, that'll kind of buckle and stretch the grain and cause distortions. We talked about at the base of trees, the trees possibly rocking back and forth. If a tree is growing on a slope, then there's a lot of reaction wood, tension and compression wood. We're pretty sure that is environmental, but that usually won't hold throughout the tree though. It's the genetic component that we're seeing in some trees where you'll have a strong genetic expression where the tree will have it'll have figure from the very bottom up through the primary and secondary limbs and going way out. We're pretty confident is genetic. So I think it's pretty safe to say it's a combination of both. And by the way, just want to show you. So here's again something you're seeing figure on the inside. And this is what you would expect to see in a tree that didn't have the figuring. Just a nice clear clean, smooth surface. You may see some fluting that goes along with the longitudinal axis of the tree, you know, you kind of see some really, really mild lobes coming out, but if you think about it, those are kind of going in the wrong direction. Okay, any questions? Yeah.
I can't remember how long ago it was when we were elected. There was some guy who was a farm forester, he was advertising for maple seedlings that came from, he's bigger. And he was trying to, I'm just curious, you mentioned this today. I wonder if there's any cases.
Yeah, so, I have ran into one or two people that have been trying to do that. You know, that say, hey, I've got a seedling that's bigger. It's because it is genetic, there could be some truth to that. The question is somebody who's selling something like that, my guess is that they probably just gathered up some maple samaras, they maybe trying to do, thinking they were doing the right thing, they may have grabbed up the samaras that maybe fell from a highly figured maple tree and gathered up. The things you have to remember is that those are just half sibs. That's probably just mom or dad. You know, there's no guarantee that that's gonna be the exact genetic duplicate of the figured maple tree. And that's, as we get into this research here that Pacific Rim Tones is doing, they kind of consider that, and I'll kind of be explaining here in just a little bit just how we're approaching it. Yeah.
So we're probably, those of us familiar with the maple nugget, some sprouts with the vengeance.
Yeah.
I'd be really interested if people would have the time to care for, you know, allow the sun sprouts from a really well figured tree to develop. And if your figure shows up, there's gonna be better inside of thing.
Yeah. You're more than on the right track. Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
Where Michigan, there was, a hot maple birds eye.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that pattern, did we, and they not, or are there patterns that?
Okay, yeah, so the question is that like back in the Midwest, some of the maples have what's called a bird's eye pattern. And, we don't pick that up, here in the big leaf maple figure in the world I'm aware of at least. You know, with the decorative stuff where like you're making furniture and you know, craftsman type items like the bowls or toys or whatever you want to carve out, you know, there's probably a whole host of other different types of patterns. You know, one that comes to mind is another type of figure called ambrosia figure, where you might have a beetle drill into a piece, you know, into a down maple log and kind of bring its host of fungi in it and create its own different patterns, you know, through that kind of staining. So that's maybe a fifth one or sixth one that I can think of. But again, bird's eye isn't prevalent out here that I'm aware of.
You mentioned maybe the spalding that I saw that I cut spalded alder and spalded cottonwood. And somebody came up and said if you cut all the boards and there's something they can get like fungus that is spalding and spray it on the board and put it back together and no like this in between and give you a whole lot of spalded water. Other than that.
I'm not, so to repeat the question, or the comment basically, it sounds like there's potential to create your own spalting by sawing the board, exposing it to some sort of a fungal exposure, then slapping them back together and letting them do their stuff. Yeah, so it makes complete sense to me. Most of the time, of course, particularly in the world of fiddleback and quilt, you don't want any spalting, you don't want any burrs. Those actually will throw it out. They're not at all desirable from, as far as what's being bought on the market. So we're always looking for ways to how to limit any spalting or yeah.
I guess, well, there's aesthetic value, acoustic value, maybe you're going to go into at some point. So I would think the small thing, especially with the sort of the taking such, are there structural concerns for that? These are the units that maybe it's like a problem with talking to them.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think the question is, kind of, again, focusing on spalting, could there be structural concerns? I mean, anytime there's a disease entered in, I mean, something is eating away at the cellulose. And so some of it, I mean, like, for a coffee table or something like that, obviously people will do spaltings, but usually they will, you can still tell whether the board is still fairly sound or not, and then, you'll probably send it through a drying process that will help, kill the fungus and then seal it, and you're probably gonna have it inside as well. So, you can contain that. Yeah, I mean, it would be a bummer to be up there performing and, hitting the back of your guitar and, putting a hole through it or something like that. So anyway. Yeah, good questions. Any others? Okay, so here's the research project that Secretary Tolman was doing. We call it the 100-Figure Maples Project because Dan Kress, who is a geneticist in the Olympia area, forest geneticist in the Olympia area, did some analysis for them in terms of, and I think some people in this room are probably familiar with evaluation plantations that are set out where trees of all sorts of different species are put in homogeneous controlled environments, not completely controlled, but maybe usually there's fences around them to keep the deer out, and then you can go ahead and evaluate how most of the time it has to do with selecting trees and figuring out which families of trees have fast diameter growth, fast height growth, good form, those kinds of things. And so Dan kind of analyzed what Cyprian Thomas is trying to do in genetic diversity that is found, and he recommended that they put together, that they find 100 what we call super figured maples and collect material from that and then put those out in plantings. And that's where the 100 comes from. And it's a suspiciously round number, but they're gonna have 3 different evaluation plantations, and getting ahead of myself. And so that's where it comes from. So what's going on is we're trying to find these super figured maples throughout its natural range. And that's part of the reason why they brought me in. They actually have quite a few. They already had quite a few collections from Skagit, Whatcom County, and I've been helping them out, not just down here in Southwest Washington, but I think furthest south. Further south I've collected has probably been around Coos Bay. And then I think probably my northernmost collection, actually, anybody know Tom Westergreen?
He's
Yeah.
renting today online.
Okay, yeah, Tom, hi. I know Tom, who's like right up there in the extreme northern, on the northern border of our state and country. I know he's helped Cyprian Thomas with this project. So anywhere we can find, we haven't gotten any from California. That's not meant to be an editorial or anything. Okay, so what we've been doing is we've been reaching out to to forest landowners, to loggers, to maple cutters, log purchasers, sawmills that cut maple, and just saying, hey, have you seen any? What have you been seeing? And that's actually part of the reason why I'm here today, even though we're kind of a little bit on the back end of the program now. At some point, later on in the program, I'll mention again, if you're aware of, a super figured high value maple that have been harvested in the past, I'd like to talk with you and see if the stump can still be found. So that's one way we're doing it. So essentially, once we maybe think we have a good candidate, if the tree is already, is still out there, it's been turned into a log. These are some of the characteristics we're looking for. We're not only looking for figuring all over the tree, but we have kind of some minimum diameters, usually 24 inches, EBH, that can vary a little bit. You need something large enough to make it worthwhile, cutting into boards and billets. A small heartwood, usually figuring in the heartwood. The wood structure changes and things are kind of clogged up and usually stained, so the heartwood, small heartwood is a good thing. Minimum of really staining and defect, and again, when there's faults or rolls, where that is not something that you, I don't think faulting would be genetic, of course, but burls could, the propensity to create burls could be. So we're trying to leave those types of figuring out instead.
Figuring and burls on the same tree.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, kind of the four types of figure we talked about, it could conceivably, one tree could have all four of those. The really challenging thing that I found, it's interesting that if you think about a big leaf maple, compared to most of our, definitely our native conifers, but even our native hardwoods here, if you think about a big leaf maple, and just think about the architecture of it. Usually if you've seen one Doug fir, you've kind of seen them all, at least in a certain size. But you look at a maple and they're almost like snowflakes or fingerprints. I mean, if you look closely, there's no two that are alike. There's just different branching, different ins and outs and wows. So, and all those different, all that different architecture can affect and make the distortions in the grain of the tree, go different directions. There's probably, and it's all kind of common knowledge. It isn't like there's a written in stone glossary of figuring terms out there, but there are probably at least 15 different names for different types of quilt and fiddleback maple. So the real place where the real place to determine whether or not a log is suitable, a tree is suitable for the 100 Figure Maples project is where we open up, we get the log to the mill, either we do or some other mill does. And it gets opened up and we get a chance to see what's inside, because that's what counts. I mean, just, so much about mill manufacturing is turning something round into something square. And so in reality, where the unless you're doing live edge, where you're seeing all those actual indicators on the outside of the sapling, very little of that is actually ever going to find its way into the product. So you gotta see what's inside to know for sure. Now, if you think we've got a hot one, then then what we do is we will go on out and try to locate the parent stump. So somebody out there is already onto this and already thought it through. Should have found it 15 years ago. Anyway, so ideally, if we can catch and earmark a tree that's been cut and the log is on the landing, a lot of times we can talk to the shovel operators who whoever's yard. You'll be surprised how well those guys can remember where a certain tree came from, especially something as unique as a big leaf maple. So they may be able to direct us to the right spot. I'll take a picture of the cross section, take some measurements, and then I'll take, it may end up me being wandering around out there with a picture of that cross-cut section, trying to find that stump. You want to talk about moralizing them sometimes. Yeah, I spent 4 days on a unit and never did find it. The log, and I had help too. Yeah, the log must have come from a tree. It was possibly in the road prism and was grubbed out and thrown into a windrow, or it was, the windrow piles were just too deep, because I was digging in, I had a lot invested, so anyways. At that point, this was a few years ago, and I kind of was wondering if I was getting too old for that, but.
So what's the benefit of locating the parent stump?
So if, I'll get to that, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so if it's not, if it's not a fresh cut, if I have a maple cutter, this is, anybody here know Lana Massa? Okay, yeah, so she's been extremely helpful. This is, here she is right here. She showed me a stump, down near Longview, actually, not too far from where I now live. And, that she and her partner had cut, 6 or 7 years ago. This was it. And, it took a little bit of work, and of course, an opening had been created, so what comes in? Openings in a forest, Himalayan blackberry. So we can collect the cuttings, you can also clone them if you like. If there's some problems with, contaminated material, sometimes cloning works better than cuttings. Pot the cuttings, they're carefully put in in different sizes of containers, at our evaluation plantation, at a place called Utopia, outside of Siege. And then we have those placed, eventually, once they're confident they can survive outside just being the pots. We put them in the evaluation plantation themselves, and we'll watch them grow. There's also some, not only are we going to be watching them to see how figure does or doesn't develop in all the different families that are out there, but we're also doing some work with having the trees at different planted in different spacings. I think we've got 12, 14, and yeah. I mean, it's 10, 12, and 14 foot spacings. To see how we develop there, and also we're even mixing in some alders, different maples in some spaces. So, anyways, yeah, if you are aware of a high value bigger maple log that has been logged, is sitting on a landing, or you do in the future, it would be great if you'd get a hold of me. I've got a few fact sheets back there and business cards, and my contact information is also in the fact sheet. And you probably have any ways in there to ask me back.
With that, some gathering, on board, there's been the original to the DNR guy. Tell us that, either within a 40 feet of rock, and you're seeing better down, and for, but, I was with the and riding this year I started recommending maple, blooming. And it seemed like they were everywhere, this one looked, and I talked with him that, and he said that the maple was, very deep, view, or something. Once you had tried, it's typically like $400. And he, that was really bad.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that, so apparently, I knew, they put out a pretty early flower, and I know. In my career, I mean, like right now, I'm saying, yeah, I've got to say it, blah, 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 I mean, I've sprayed, been involved in spraying literally thousands of acres of forest land. The big leaf maple, so to keep them from sprouting. Matter of fact, one week I was doing this project, the next week I was involved in another. It kind of depends on where it's, maple, so I know that, for example, that the beekeepers will not, if you have a spray unit next to beehives, they want you to, they want you to hold off on spraying. So,
Good question, I've got some must be done in default, and the need for a lot of bigger on the beach tree, and I had a very dominant. What's common in that? Evaluate on the state.
yeah, so the question has to do with kind of the ongoing, forest health vigor issues, and particularly as it's been hitting people. I know that the forest health specialists at DNR have looked into this, and there's a paper out. I can't remember exactly what they said, but I think it was a combination of, climate changes and just, I don't think there's one specific cause to that. Does anybody else remember about that? But the big leaf maple buyback is a big deal right now.
I think the general main cause is that's in longer stuff.
Okay, 1% of that.
The same stuff that's hitting down.
Okay.
And then these trees are 50 years, and I see them go from really robust and
Yeah.
the tiny leaves. So,
It's a big deal. Okay, I think then we need to close it.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're gonna have Robert lead us out to the shiitake mushroom area.
Which is just right next to the church.
Do you want to make an announcement?